Hello, welcome to the first video for Chapter 11, Section 1. We're basically just going to be going through an intro here, and it might take a little bit longer than some of our other videos, but that's okay. I've broken up the rest of the sections into very small videos. So this first is basically just going through what a polyhedron is, what different types of 3D shapes are, how to name them, and then their different parts. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, first off, we're just going to talk about polyhedrons here, which is a type of 3D solid, and these are bounded by polygon faces, meaning we want all of the faces to be flat. All of those faces come together at an edge. I'm just going to highlight some of these important words. So faces, edges, and all of the edges come together at one point in different parts of these polyhedrons called vertexes or vertices. Basically where three or more edges come and meet together. So we're going to break these apart and start to basically color in these 3D shapes here. So the first thing I'm going to worry about are faces. So faces are going to be our flat surfaces. So in this in particular, we have a bottom down here. So that's one. A top. That's two. A left side, which is three. A right side, which is 4, a front side, which is 5, and a back, which is 6. So we have 6 faces total here. Let's look at our edges. So let's use blue for our edges here. So for edges, we're looking at where all those faces meet. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So it looks like we have 12 edges. And all of those edges come together at different vertices. Okay, so for our vertices, I'm just going to look at where all those points are basically. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it looks like I have 8 vertices. Let's do the same thing on B. So I am first going to worry about my faces. I have one face down here on the bottom, and then 4 going around. So 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so looks like I have 5 all total because I have the 4 are on the sides and the 1 on the bottom. Now let's look at our edges. So for our edges, I'm just going to go around the bottom again. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. So it looks like I have 8 total. All right, 8 edges. All right, let's look at those vertices. So I'm going to look at basically the bottom here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 around the bottom, and 1 at the top. So that'd be 5 all total. And I said I had 5 faces, right? Well, I don't know why I wrote 4. 5 faces and 5 vertices. Okay, so there we have basically finding faces, edges, and vertices. That's all we need for this first slide. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so here it's really just talking about what is not a polyhedron but is still a 3D shape. If you notice, we're talking about a cylinder, a cone, and a sphere. All 3 of these are not polyhedrons. They are all just some sort of 3D shape. We don't really have a name for that, really. We're not talking about the name for it yet. So all of these have rounded surfaces, which make them not polyhedrons. So I'm going to say is they have rounded surfaces. There we go. Let's go on to the next slide. So this next slide is talking about prisms and pyramids. These are the two types of polyhedrons we will be basically working with. We will also be working with some cylinders and cones, but these are going to be the main polyhedrons that we are working with. So prisms are basically, if we're going to talk about how they're different, we're going to be talking about their bases and their lateral faces. So a pyramid, or sorry, not a pyramid, a prism has two bases and has rectangular lateral faces. And a pyramid has one base and triangular lateral faces. Okay, so there is the main difference between prisms and pyramids. Let's go on to the next slide. We're going to kind of dive in deeper to what are bases, what are the lateral faces, and how can I find them. All right, so first of all, I'm going to talk about prisms. All of the polyhedrons get their name from their base shape. So sometimes it's difficult to figure out where your base shapes are. If you're given the name, you know what to look for. I'm going to use blue here to talk about what a base is and where the base is. And I'm first going to talk about this in terms of our prisms. So we have a couple of them here. Okay, so if we're looking at this hexagonal prism, hexagonal, that word there is telling us we're looking for a hexagon. So it looks like I have a hexagon here on top and on the bottom. So those must be my bases. Now they're not the bases since they're on top and bottom. We can have bases on the sides, depending on which face our prism is sitting on. But we know that they're the bases because we're working with a hexagonal prism. And notice every other shape is a rectangle. So those are all of the rectangular lateral faces. Now we'll talk about that in a second. Let's look at this triangular prism. The bases we're looking for here are triangles. So we're looking for the triangles again on top and bottom. And we know that these are the bases and not the other three sides, because the other three sides are rectangles, not triangles. So the next one is a pyramid, and we'll talk about that one in a second. Notice we do see some triangles, we do see a rectangle down there, but we're going to talk about that one in a second because the rules kind of change for pyramids. I do have another prism down here, and we know this is a prism and not a pyramid because it does not come up to one point. It's coming up to an edge. And that basically tells us that all of our sides, all of our lateral faces are rectangles. Notice we have a rectangle here, here, and here. This is an example of a prism where the bases are not on top and bottom. We are working with another triangular prism here. This one is another triangular prism. So whenever I see the word triangular, that's telling me I'm looking for my triangles. And I have a triangle on the back and on the front. Okay. And here's the front triangle. So those are my bases. And now, whenever I'm talking about my lateral faces in prisms, let's go, which color am I going to use? Let's use this pink here. I'm going to talk about the lateral faces. Now, in a prism, all of the lateral faces will be rectangles. Anytime you are working with a prism and trying to find lateral faces, those will be all of the rectangles. Unless it's a rectangular prism, in that case, it'll be all the ones around the side, since everything's a rectangle there. Okay, so let's look at this hexagonal prism. If I'm trying to find my lateral face, I'm going to start in the back. I see one rectangle here. I see 1 on either side. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So notice all of my lateral faces there. We have 6 of them. Hexagon, 6 lateral faces. The name will also tell you how many lateral faces you should see. Now, in my triangular prism, I should have 3. So they should just be connecting the 2 bases. So I have 1 in the back here. I have 1 in the front. And 1 on the side. So that is my 3 lateral faces. And down here on this second triangular prism that I've shown, I have 1 lateral face that's actually on the bottom here, and is one of my rectangles. I have another one here off to the side, and I have my last one right here. And notice these are really just connecting my 2 bases. That's all that these lateral faces do in a prism. Now we're going to do the same thing with our pyramid over here. So I'm going to change back to that light blue to talk about my base. The base of a pyramid, I'm looking for whatever's in the name. So the rectangle for a rectangular prism. So it could look like a square. This one kind of looks like a square, but remember, all squares are rectangles. So we have a nice rectangle down here. So there is our one base. Usually the base will be on the bottom in a pyramid unless it's kind of set over on its side, but that will be pretty easy to tell. Okay, that looks a little wonky. It's probably going to be one of the other sides. So let's see here. Let's go for our lateral faces. Now this one I should have 4. Again, if we're talking about how, sorry, my cat just jumped up on something. So if you hear that loud noise, that was my cat. So whenever we're talking about how many lateral faces we have, we're basically talking about the same thing. Notice in the hexagonal prism, we had 6 lateral faces. The triangular prism, we had 3 lateral faces. In a rectangular prism, we should have 4 lateral faces. So it just follows that same trend. The only thing that's different here is our lateral faces are going from the base up to a vertex. So here we go. Here's one lateral face right up here in the front. We have one here off to the side. I'm just going to keep going around. We have one in the back. And we have one more on the side. So we have 4 lateral faces, and all of those are rectangles. Sorry, they're all triangles here in our rectangular prism. So that right there is basically how you can find the bases and the lateral faces of prisms and pyramids. And we're going to be talking about that a lot in the next couple sections. This is probably the longest video that we will have. So if you need to, take a break, walk around, and come back. But I don't have many questions in this because our videos are kind of long. So the next one should be a little bit nicer, and I'll see you in the next video.